Hi students, I wanted to follow up on this local color mixing process. We set up the wheel, we made sure the yellow, green, and yellow, orange were yellow enough. We made the mud mixture that went in the middle. We mixed a tiny dot of the mud mixture with each hue. At least we did all 6 triads, all 2 triads. And so you had your earth tones, then we mixed all the opposites to get 6 complements. Then you came up with a random object around the house, flat, that had kind of a neutral to it, and we mixed and matched. If you already have that palette out, you can use it as a reference and start a fresh one, or you can scoop up the paint that's still wet and put it on another palette, but you don't want to work within dry piles of paint, because then you get little paint chips. But as you know, I ran out of yellow the last time, so I'm using the same palette now. I put more yellow out of my palette, and I have identified a local color image from Pinterest, and you all will have selected your picture by now. And this is it looks like chocolate, but it's actually soap. Natural soaps are just beautiful, actually, when you see them, because they have repetition, they have a range of value and temperature. I mean, so many things do. But this is a great example of a complex local color. Now, if you look at it, most people might be like, oh, it's just brown soap. But you know what? It's not. It's very, very multifaceted in terms of hue. You can look at this here, you can zoom in. Right away I saw blue, similar to my cardboard. I saw blue and white, and then I saw some red. I see a little bit of pink warm around the edge. I see a difference from orange to kind of a red violet in here. I see a yellow within the beige. So even within something like this, you're going to get a serious range of hues and values and temperatures and saturations. So having a palette like this, again, remember, you always want to have your white, your 3 primaries, your black, and your mud. And I also have my leftover mix from the cardboard, which is very helpful in this particular subject. It's very light, actually, overall, this subject. So I'm going to do a lot of mixing in the pool of white. So I did kind of a loose sketch. That's enough. And I'm going to start painting, and think about opportunities where you can do hard edge and blending as well. Lots of both on here. The thing I wanted to show you was, even though we just did a flat piece of cardboard or a flat object that you found around the house, whether it's your skin or silver or whatever, metal, wood, cardboard, in that case it was a flat object. Now we're dealing with volume. So we have to deal with the way that the volume is created by weaving in those variations of temperature, value, saturation, and intensity and hue. So in this case, each shape is going to vary, whereas the cardboard was just a flat piece. This shape has, even on here you can see, it's sort of a pinkish, and it gets lighter on the edges. So in this case, not only does the value change, but it gets bluer and cooler on the edge. Up here, and this is another thing everybody loves to do, is create a hard edge of value where there isn't any. They want the contrast because they're frustrated they can't see where one thing hits another. So they exaggerate it just to try to organize it, make it look cool, but it doesn't look cool unless you match. So you can see how this thing is fading into that. It's a beautiful moment of integration, and you don't want to lose that by just exaggerating the edge or putting a line or something. Again, here, see how it fades into the background? Those are delicate moments that you want to cherish, because if you don't, then when they do have drama, you've lost the whole point. This feels purpley to me. All right, so I'm going to take a sense first here of the overall relationships, and then I'm going to show you some examples of blending, keeping my eye not only on the color and the values in here, but also the rendering. I don't want to lose the proportions. So let's see where I can start. I'm gonna start with some blending into white, I believe. Let's see. I've already got some nice earth tones happening in here. I'm just gonna use kind of a flat brush. Let me just do one area because, you know, I can't do all of it. But I want to do a reference. Like if I'm gonna paint this, I want to make sure I know what that is in the back. I don't have to paint all of it in, but you always want to have a reference as to what's around what you're about to paint. Now the background's pretty pink. Remember, you hold this up and compare. That's pretty darn close. It might need a dot of yellow. And of course I'm matching the value. I'm matching the temperature. It's gonna shift as it goes. It gets cooler here with a shadow. It gets down here, there's a shadow. There's a lot of things that shift in this as it goes. Let me focus on over here, just so you can see well, and I don't want to try to do the whole thing in one sitting, but I think it's helpful sometimes to just see what the process is. Now see how this beige doesn't match, and I'll know more when I put this in whether that's accurate, but I feel like it's too dark, so I'm going to put some white. Remember, everything happens on the palette. It's almost like the painting is secondary. It's all about the palette, looking at your source, and matching accuracy, not getting caught up in your, you know, the actual fun part, which is the actual painting. I mean, it's all fun, but it's like, uh-oh, I got too pink. It's like, see how I left it there though? Just like before, I want to start in a new area. It's getting better. See, it's getting better. Now I can plop that down, see that's better, as a reference, but I still got to come back later and compare it to that. But by blocking this down, I can start getting a sense of, just a general sense of what's here. And the best thing to do is do this kind of diluted. Remember in the other paintings, doing a diluted underpainting is really important, because not only does it not waste paint, it allows you to start making these color relationships clear before committing. Because as you know, it's trial and error. We don't know if it's correct. So instead of using a ton of white, I'm just using a little more water and starting to kind of just look. Like take note. Like what is going on here? What is this? And how does it mix in here? See, already I think it's too beige and maybe needs to be more pink, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to just keep moving on. But just putting that in, I don't have to put it all over, la-di-da, you know, like this whole process. No, I have enough information for over here. You know, just because you get on a tangent doesn't always mean you should just keep going with it. We don't know if it's right yet, so why keep going until we have a little more? See, this is too dark right there. I either have to add more white or more water in this case. But so I'm noticing my values off and my color a bit, but that's okay. I'm going to move on. I want to start working in this area with one of my cooler red violet mud mixtures. You can even place it there with a palette knife. That works better here value wise. But this is still very light. I'm not leaving any texture. I'm just kind of, if there is a texture, just paint it off or wipe it off. Let's see, I'm going to put a little bit of blue in here. This feels like a better hue for here. Maybe here. I'm also kind of starting to block in the composition a little bit. Since you're on a board, you can be a little scrapey about it, which is nice. Okay, what else do I want to do? The shape will change, that's just the way it is. I'm going to do more of a cool but lighter value for the top of that seeming dessert thing. See how purpley this is now over here? Now I can hold this up and go, all right, this is better. This is warmer, this is cooler. Trial and error. And always a pile within a pile. Oh, that's better. There's definitely a lot of blue in this. So it's just getting to know. Let's go with that and see how that works out. All right, it's too gray, it's too blue, but I'm using a very washy application to start getting these relationships. Sometimes when you place the color around the color, it makes more sense and it's working. Other times it's so obvious that it's not. This is one of those choices where I don't want to let my brown take over and lose this beautiful color that's in here. See how I'm doing cross contour too. So again, it's an underpainting just like we did on the other ones. Going in here, starting to notice where it gets light. It flares out over here, but over here it's lighter. While I have this on my brush, I can place it somewhere else that I might see it. This one is further away, it's going to end up being more blurry, but this tells me that there's some kind of a red in here. There's some kind of a red in this shape, but there's also a purple. It's like a periwinkle. So within that again, I can mix a little more blue and red. If this gets out of control, like I said, just move the parts that are working onto the other palette. But at this point for me, this is very helpful because I'm using up the paint from the other project and I'm able to see that's better already. I'm able to get a sense of this underpainting, this diluted underpainting, without wasting a lot of my white, because as we know, white just disappears too. So really, this is a yellow-purple composition. You wouldn't think that looking at it, but it's yellow and purple, yellow-purple. So just by doing this, I'm realizing that I don't need as much brown. It's really more purple-purple. And when I start to get more confident about that, I can actually apply it. So I'm going to mix another kind of a light blue like I did on the other cardboard one. Just see how that works. It's kind of getting, this kind of works a little bit. It works on the fuzzy parts, on the glowy parts, you could say. And within that, I can apply. Of course, you don't have to use a palette knife. I just am because it's right there, and this is very underpainty. Oh, it needs more red. Your palette's not going to be as organized, sadly, as it normally is. It's hard to keep it together on this kind of a project, but you just got to take a minute here and there and really scrape it into one and make sure it's not completely mushy, because then things start to get all mushed together. As long as you have your distinct 6 colors still available, you're in pretty good shape. And hopefully a much bigger palette. I'm using a smaller mixing area just so it's visible from this tripod, and also so that it's right above me and not on an angle, which happens on that other, when I put the ladder in here. Okay. Alright, so now I'm noticing this really cool light edge there that I'm going to get later. So again, we are starting to understand the subject, just beginning to, and making mental notes to ourselves. I'm too dark right now, I'm getting too dark, but I want to start looking at the difference between this temperature and that. Now this has the blue again. Of course, the first thing to go is the white, especially in this subject. And you can use several brushes, but for this part, I really am just using one because I'm trying to figure out where the temperatures shift. And I'm using more watery kind of, so I don't have to have, I'm not worried too much about the hard edges and stuff like that. I see orange over here. I see orange. So before I forget, again, you always want to grab it while you see it. Grab it while you see it, because then you might not see it again. You might, eventually, but it's like you might as well catch it while you can. And I just saw an orange. So I'm getting an orange. Of course, I call it orange, but it's orange mixed with the neutrals. But I'm going to take this while I can. See how purpley this brown is? If I can put an orange, needs more yellow. Now I kind of have this warm area on my palette. This is like my orange section. And of course, when you add red, I'm going to use a different section of that. Because remember, you want to grab an exaggerated version of that, what you see. If you always tone down what it is that you think you see, it doesn't express the temperature and the hue. Like, see how it's yellow in there? And I know it runs into the other one. Obviously the value is too dark, but this shows me a little clue for later that this edge is more yellowy. It's these subtleties that you don't see until you start to get to know your subject. It's pinkish, but it's orangish. So I'm putting this in there to remind myself of what I saw earlier, so that when I come back to it, I can grab it. And then the other thing that you want to do is, while this is still on there, scan where else is there orange? Where else is this happening? Well, there's a little in the back. There's a little in the back. I don't want to do that, but look, there's orange here a little bit. And you don't want to just randomly put it, but I see it here. This may seem really subtle, but it's actually very purposeful, because we're starting to identify temperature within this neutral subject. Overall, I would say this is a purple orange subject. Has yellow in the back, has a lot of temperature shifts. And remember, you can hold it up here too. I'm not going to get anywhere close right now, but I'm also doing a little cross contour. This is chopped off, so it's up and down and side to side, but mostly up and down. And I can start thinking, just like on the others, what's going to end up being a good opportunity for blending? Where can I do hard edge? Where is it soft and disappears into other areas? You know, it's like, it's just like an introduction, you'd say. So it's kind of like, well, I see red here. I made it really watery, but that's okay, because why waste, you know? This is just a layer. The beauty of acrylic is it dries so darn fast that if you're on a roll and you're ready to move on and you have an idea of what you just saw, you can get on it pretty quick. If you're using a different material that doesn't dry as fast, you don't have that opportunity to nip it in the bud, you know. You have to wait to get to it, and you don't even know how long that will be. Okay, this is very light. This is going to be a fun spot for blending later. Not as much white in between here. Now, if it gets too mushy, which can happen with all these neutrals and these neutral subject matters, you'll need to get rid of all your neutrals on here and go back to your 6 and start fresh. That will enable you to really get it under control. Just save some mud on there, maybe a few muds, a cool one, a warm one. And right now I'm thinking about value. I'm not going to go pure white, but I'm going to take advantage of my observation, which is that this is very light right here. In fact, it's lighter than that. But I was able right now just to capture the cool temperature of it and not worry about where it hits on the background. It's still a little bit dark, but see, remember my orange one, now I can get a little here to see what the shape is, a little bit of there. And the more you stand up and step back, you'll be able to really see. Obviously that's too dark, but I have to look and go, okay, is the temperature starting to happen? This is much purplier over here. So I'm gonna start covering what I did there because that is clearly too reddish. It needs to be more purple. So we're kind of looking at the whole picture now. I can put that darker value in the back. This is a perfect example of how everything is in everything. I'm going to go back to this. If it gets too mucky, you want to stop putting white in everything, wash everything. But in this case, it's very mucky all around, really it is. So I'm going to start putting just a little information here about this value. And that value is going to need to be crisped out with some blue and maybe some black. So that's something I would come back to. And then once this is on my brush, I'm going to add some blue to it. I should be appropriate and use this the way it's supposed to be. It's like you want to keep those principles in mind, you really do, but you also want to make sure you have so much going on your palette that you have opportunities. See how that black took over, so it's a little dark, but it does get pretty dark down here. So I can kind of just block that in a little bit, way too dark. But there are a couple moments that I can capture while I'm here that are fairly cool in temperature, but that totally went too dark. But this is a great way of blocking in your composition without being too compulsive about your underpainting of or underdrawing of the grid, because the grid's going to go away. I mean, the grid is really a starting point. There's so much that happens on top of that, just so much. Once this whole thing is covered, you'll want to switch, clean up your palette, scoop it to another one, get fresh brushes, fresh water. But getting it on there, it's fine. We'll see how much better that is. It's still not light enough, but it's another layer that I can use to compare to the value of the negative space, which is clearly too dark now. Now I wouldn't have known this was too dark had I not started filling it in. So this is a month-long painting like the other two. This is long. So don't rush it, but just get the sense of the whole thing first. I want to use purple in here. Put a little red and a little blue. Keeping in mind that the red is not as strong as the blue. This is more of a purpley. They're still all beige, but it's different. Like this is more purpley. This is more purpley here. There's a lot of blue in this one. And that's repeated here, and that's repeated here. So now I'm starting to get the design. Boom, boom, boom. I knew I liked it for a reason. Now I'm weaving that red back in there, but that was more purpley. But I'm not stopping because I'm seeing that I have this now here. Might as well do the cross contour. You're there already. It helps show volume and it helps you get used to how things move. Trying to make sure I don't put too much paint on there. But when it's the right hue, it really is good to capture it. Color is tricky. Color is affected by color. So you might do something that looks perfect, and then the minute you put the color next to it, it's not. This is a perfect example here where I was saying, like, if I make one big pile and fill this whole thing in, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be like totally flat. So I'm just do a mini blending here. So the best thing to do would be to make piles within piles. So within this area, I have about 7 or 8 potentials in terms of value, hue, all those elements that I can weave into this area while painting it as it appears. So let me get a little more of this. I can start taking a look at how this moves. I can start seeing where the lighter values hit and the redder ones. I'm going to mix this in here. If you see it, it's there, grab it and mix it well, because otherwise you'll just have little blobbies everywhere. You don't want to get in the habit of using the brush to mix. It's tempting because it's like you're so, the minute you see it, it's like, okay, I gotta mix it while I can see it. But better to mix it with a knife and then saturate the new value into the brush. Let's see what I see here. That's kind of a nice color. Not purpley enough though for that area, but then I can scan around and think, okay, where can I apply that? It's a little too gray for that. I can put it here and get rid of this that I made too dark. Over here. Okay. Now this needs more purple. So I'm gonna get this paint off of this brush and rinse out the brush well, because I need to make sure I'm getting the purple blue in here. It's this gorgeous, very light purple. And if I try to mix that into another brownish, it's not gonna be as